Okay, it's time to get started with Sustainable Cleaning Revolution webinar. So I'll hand over to Product Specialist Steve Courtney to kick the session off.
Hello everybody, hi, my name is Steve Courtney. I'm Business Development Manager for Robert Scott and Product Specialist for Toucan devices that we sell. First of all, I want to welcome you today and thank you very much for taking the time to join us. I hope you're all keeping well and safe out there wherever you are. The subject today is sustainable cleaning, and we believe that the Toucan devices that we sell will enable you to do that. The devices make an extremely powerful but extremely safe sanitizer, disinfectant and cleaning solution. And the bottom line of this is that you make it yourself. And all you need is a device, tiny amount of salt, ordinary tap water, and a little bit of electricity. And you can make your solution. And when you want some more, you just make some more whenever you want. It's great for your carbon footprint. No more ordering of chemicals that are trundling all over the country in lorries. No harsh, aggressive chemicals. You make them when you want. No inventory, no need for storage. And also fantastic for curtailing your use of plastic waste, because all you're going to do with these devices is reuse your spray bottles, fill up your mop buckets, or put them into your scrubber dryers. I'm not the only one here today. We're really lucky today because I've been joined by Robin Turner. Robin is the CEO of Centrigo that make these Toucan devices, and we've been working with Robin and Centrigo for the last 5 years. So I'm just going to give Robin a wave. Hello Robin, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Steve. Good to see you.
Thank you, Robin. And we have Dr. Darren Reynolds, and Dr. Darren Reynolds is Professor of Health and Environment at UWE, University of Western England, down in the Bristol area. I know he's head of department, I can never get this right, I think it's biology, biocidal and analytics. Is that right, Darren?
No.
No.
It's near enough.
So for those out there, Robin makes the devices, he's been heavily involved for many years, and Darren is an expert in these solutions, and the solutions are, the scientific word is electrochemical activated solutions, ECAS, and you'll hear Darren mention that when he starts to talk to us. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is just make some solution up for you, just to show you how this thing works. And in front of me here, I hope you can see it okay, we have the smallest device we do. We do several devices, they all do the same thing, but make amounts of solution. And the one I've got here is a Toucan Eco 3. What I'm going to do, Robin, if that's okay, I'll start it going, and then if you wouldn't mind, I'll come to you, and if you could just explain to our webinars or webinees just exactly what's going on in there, if that's okay with you. So, everybody out there, that's just a jug of tap water. We got that from the canteen round the corner. That just fits on the base there. I hope you can see that. There's a blue light there. It's just ordinary table salt in this. And for 1 litre, it's 2 grams. And you can get this salt from any supermarket. I get mine from Tesco's. Darren probably gets his from Fortnum and Mason. Robin, bargain home stores or something like that, I think. But it's worth just mentioning this because the thing about making this solution is it's virtually free once the devices are purchased. So for instance, you go to the supermarket, 750 gram container of table salt won't cost you more. And that will make you 375 litres of this solution, 500, 750 ml spray bottles. And you're making yourself an extremely powerful sanitizer, has all the accreditations, and we'll talk about coronavirus and virus kill a bit later on as well. So to get things started, 1 litre of water, 2 grams of salt. Just going to give this a little stir. What we're doing is introducing the tiny amount of salt there, which is sodium chloride, to the water, hydrogen and oxygen, and we'll press the button. And what you're seeing there, guys, is not only do you get a device for making this fantastic solution, you get your own lava lamp. The blue light has gone on there, and that's showing you how that's activated. Robin, do you mind just explaining to our viewers here what's actually happening now in the device?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. So effectively, you've got a form of electrolysis. So as everybody will remember from their physics and chemistry school days, electrolysis is where you place a positive electrode, an anode, and a negative electrode, a cathode, into a solution. You pass the current across those, and the electrolysis changes the structure of the compounds and the elements that you have in that solution. So you're not adding or getting rid of any elements, you're changing the way that they're structured together, and you end up with a different solution. So here, as Steve said, you start off with water, so hydrogen, oxygen, and you put a little bit of salt in, so you're adding sodium and chloride. So at the start of the process, you have very slightly salty water. You're then passing an electric current across the cell, which in this case is situated at the bottom of that jug. And that cell is made up of two plates, one of which is taking the positive, the anode, one of which is taking the negative, the cathode. And there is a reaction that is taking place at the face of that cell. And you are restructuring your slightly salty water into a solution that contains two active substances. The first active substance is called hypochlorous acid, and hypochlorous acid is a very safe but very powerful disinfectant. And the reason that it's safe is because it's one of the compounds that we produce ourselves naturally. So when we come into contact with it, we don't have an adverse reaction. So the chloride in the salt combines with the hydrogen and the oxygen in the water to create hypochlorous acid, HOCl, hydrogen, oxygen, chloride. The sodium in the salt combines with the oxygen and a little bit of the chloride to produce sodium hypochlorite. And sodium hypochlorite, as a lot of you will know, is more commonly known as bleach. In this case, it's a very mild form of bleach. Its pH is around about 8, so it will not have the aggressive nature of many commercial bleaches, but it will provide a cleaning element to the solution, as well as a little bit of disinfection. So over the activation that you see in this particular unit of 1 liter, over the activation of 4 minutes, at the end of that process, then you will have a solution that contains two active substances, hypochlorous acid, sodium hypochlorite. So you will have a combined disinfectant and cleaning solution.
Robin, thanks for that. That was far better than if I was describing it, so thank you for that. Robin, we've got a couple of minutes till this stops deactivating, and for all you watching, it takes 4 to 5 minutes to activate. Robin, do you mind just over a minute just telling us a little bit about your backstory and how you got to be making these brilliant devices that make this solution? I know you were a dairy farmer back in the late 20s, is that?
Well, that's going way back in time, Steve. I mean, I became interested in this technology probably now about 12 years ago, with no scientific background or engineering background, but it seemed to me that if it did what people were claiming it could do, then that was interesting from a commercial point of view. The technology, excuse me, the technology was originally developed in the USSR at that stage, primarily as a response to the threat of biological warfare, but also in things like the gas and oil industry, trying to reduce microbiological loads, and interestingly enough, in things like cleaning mirrors for satellites. So a lot of research was put in the USSR, but the USSR then was freed up and became Russia. That continued. And then I guess about 20 years ago, 18 years ago, that technology started to migrate from Russia at that stage to South Korea and to the West. And at that point, the technology became a lot more robust, and scientists such as Darren started to take an interest in the properties of the solutions that were generated. And I guess the story of electrochemical activation, we've been part of that story for the last sort of 12 years as the technology has matured, but also as the scientists, like down at the University West of England, have put the scientific background and research into the solutions to give it scientific credibility.
Robin, that was brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Just quickly, while Robin was speaking there, you may have noticed there was a little beep. All those watching, the device has stopped activating. You can see that it's, I use the word relaxing down, and now that solution is made. And there it is. I'm going to pour it into a spray bottle. This is what you guys can do.
And Steve, just while you're doing that, it's worth mentioning that you've got the smallest device, which is easy to demonstrate. There are a whole range of devices in terms of sizes, outputs, concentrations, the type of solution. So the one that Steve's demonstrating there is the smallest and effectively the most simple device that is there, but it's very good for a whole range of applications.
And the solution in here, webinees and webinars who are listening in here, is non-toxic, non-hazardous, completely harmless. There's no COSH implications on this. Control of substances hazardous to health. So completely safe and easy to use, but loves killing bugs and loves killing viruses. And you just make that yourself. You'll now spray away on any hard surface, on fabrics. It will sanitize, etc., etc. So look, I'm going to pass over to Darren now. I wouldn't mind asking you, Darren, how does that work? What is hypochlorous acid, and how does it do what it does?
Well, Robin gave a very, I think he's put me out of a job by talking a little bit about the science there. I would just point out, just referring to what Robin mentioned earlier, actually, what you've just demonstrated there, Steve, is beautiful chemistry. And that would be absolutely a fantastic reproduction of Michael Faraday's experiments in the early part of the 19th century. So 1830, around 1839, he would have performed something very similar to what you've performed there, using slightly, obviously, much dated material and dated substances. So actually, hypochlorous acid is a British invention. And I take absolutely Robin's point about some of the technological advancements. But what's interesting about this entire story is the things that we've forgotten about. And hypochlorous acid and the electrolysis process has been a forgotten science. I mean, Michael Faraday did that in the mid part of the 19th century. Hypochlorous acid was used to treat wounds in the Boer War and in the First World War. And then, in the early 20th century, we then, realized antibiotics, and we kind of forgot all these wonderful inventions. And I think other countries such as Russia didn't forget and then subsequently developed the technology, and we went a slightly different way. And the reason why hypochlorous acid is such a fantastic antimicrobial solution is in part because of its chemistry. So you have two things predominantly in that electrochemical cell there that you've just demonstrated. And the two things that Robin very well explained is hypochlorite, and the other aspect of that is hypochlorous acid. Hypochlorous is a neutral compound. I mean, I don't want to get too geeky, but it's not charged. It's HACl. It doesn't have a charge. And that's a really fantastic quality to have if you're an antimicrobial. And the reason for that is you can sneak past all sorts of things because you're electrically neutral. So a lot of things just don't pick you up. A lot of substances, a lot of materials that are on, that surround bacteria, for example, or in which bacteria live, have a charge. And as soon as you have a charge, you can get migrated to those substances. And as soon as you interact with that substance in an electrical way, you then have to perform your antimicrobial process. Hypochlorous acid is so effective because it can do two things. The first thing is that it can sort of attach and do some damage to the cell wall of a bacterial cell. Secondly, it can actually diffuse through the bacterial cell wall and attack DNA on the inside. And that's, so it has a double-stranded or a double-pronged approach. Hypochlorite, on the other hand, is so reactive that it generally has done all of its work by the time it reaches the outer cell of the bacteria. And what we know about bacteria is they're wonderful things. I mean, I know they've got a very bad press at the moment, and viruses quite rightly too, from a human perspective, but from an evolutionary perspective, they're magnificent things. And they come in all different shapes, sizes, and structures. And some bacterial cell develop mechanisms for becoming more resistant to invading bodies on the outside. And one of those things could be a thicker cell wall. Hypochlorous acid doesn't have that problem because it can diffuse through that cell wall because it's electrically neutral and cause damage on the inside. So that's the wonderful thing about hypochlorous acid. And again, picking up on what Robin mentioned earlier, our bodies produce hypochlorous acid. We produce lots of radical substances, or oxygen radicals, all that kind of stuff within our body to counteract invasions from outside in much smaller quantities, but nevertheless our bodies has developed this from an evolutionary perspective ability to produce such substances in small amounts through our white blood cells to counteract invasions, really.
Robin, for our webinars here who are out there listening to this, would you advocate hypochlorous acid, the devices that Robin's made, to help us in a sustainable world, which is something that we're really at the forefront at the moment, aren't we?
Yes, I mean, I think, Steve, it's interesting in terms of the evolution of demand of systems that generate these solutions. And I would say that last year and the year before, there was a lot of interest in the systems because people and corporations felt that they were environmentally sensitive and responsible. In other words, of course, there is an energy and a plastic and a carbon footprint in manufacturing the device and getting that device from the factory to the site. But once it's on the site, then the only things that have to be brought in are water, which is available, a little bit of power that is available, and then salt. So salt is the only consumable that has to be brought in from the outside. But in such small quantities, it's it should be taken in context. So in terms of its environmental credentials, first of all, the consumables that are being used are water and salt, both natural, but more importantly, naturally sustainable. Yes, you've got a little bit of power, but the amount of power required per litre is extremely small. You've then got a very, very limited carbon footprint in terms of transport. So, as I said, you've got the transport of the device from the factory to the site, but if you compare that with synthetic chemicals, every month there is a transportation. Well, first of all, there's transportation of raw materials from a provider to a manufacturing hub, then it's put in plastic containers, then it's sent to a distribution hub, then it's sent out every month to the end client. Transport, plastic containers, and then the disposal of the packaging, whether it's cardboard packaging for containers to be in, or the plastic containers themselves. And of course, a lot of the manufacturers will say that plastic is recyclable, but we know from statistics that even in this country, it's well-developed environmental policies, only about 1/3 of plastic containers actually get recycled. The rest go into landfill, and then you're looking at a decomposition profile of over 400 years. So I think in terms of its environmental footprint, these systems tick a lot of boxes. And then when you look at the solution itself, the solution will relax back to slightly salty water, either over time or when it's used and comes into contact with organic matter. So there's no hazard to any waterways if that solution is discharged.
Dan, It would be remiss of us not to mention a really interesting, fantastic project that you're carrying out at UWE, and I think Robin's involved with that, which is Project India. Could we give you a couple of minutes just to tell everybody listening in about that project, please?
Yeah, brilliant. Well, we're sort of taking UK inspired technology that we've spent a lot of time developing, and we're working with our Indian partners. That's over in Kolkata, in West Bengal, and a colleague of mine, Professor Tapan Dutta, from the Bose Institute. And we're developing water technologies capable of turning dirty water into clean water. And some people might say, well, why is that so difficult? Or is that difficult? Well, the answer clearly is yes. And the reason why the answer is yes is because there are probably half the world's population don't have adequate sanitation. Up to probably 800 million lack biologically safe water. So we're using the very types of technology that you've demonstrated over there, Steve, and we're applying that to treating water. Clean drinking water, we're using it to disinfect at the end of a process, but we're also using that very same type of technology to help keep filtration membranes clean in our water treatment technology. And what we've been able to achieve at the moment is continuous production of clean drinking water on site at the University of the West of England for a period of about 9 months, creating over 2 million litres of clean water. That's water that you would drink, that I would drink, that I would gladly give to my children. 2 million litres. So that's probably equivalent to keeping 300 people in safe water for a whole year. Or looking at another way, it's maybe 6 million plastic bottles worth of water. So this technology is extremely versatile and extremely useful. You can use that in those big systems that I just talked about, or you could even use it in much smaller systems at a household level, indeed very similar to how you're using it now in your demonstration. And again, just to get back on the sustainability side, it's absolutely vital. We all have a role to play. I mean, bleach has been used since the middle part of the 19th century. In the UK alone, we consume and dispose of 7.7 billion plastic water bottles just for water in the UK every single year. 7.7 billion. So we are reaching a stage where plastic, it should absolutely not be an option for products where there are clear alternatives. It takes 180 litres of water to produce 1 kilogram of plastic, right? So you can see there's just a vicious circle. So in terms of sustainability, we all have a role to play. We're doing our bit with our partners in relation to providing clean drinking water to India. And I think people here in Europe and certainly in the UK can play their part by choosing alternative technologies and approaches that, you know, remove the need for single-use plastic.
And sorry, Steve, can I just butt in? Darren, you did tell me a really shocking statistic about the death rate for children through poor quality drinking water in India.
Well, I mean, just in general, Robin, you know, on planet Earth, biologically unsafe water has killed more people than all the wars that we've ever had. So it remains the biggest killer today, this year. There will be hundreds of thousands, millions actually, probably, of children under the age of 5 that will get ill because of biologically unsafe water. And very sadly, a significant number of those children will die. They will die of very preventable diseases. They will die of cholera. They will die of diarrhea. They will die because they do not have biologically safe water. We can put satellites on meteors. We've got 5G. We can do all sorts of really, really clever things. We are still struggling to provide the basic human rights of clean water to everybody on Earth. And we're extremely lucky here in the UK to have access to that.
Darren, thank you for that. Very passionate there, getting that across. Thank you. And Robin, just coming to you, just about the certification for the solution and cost implications. I think we've had lots of discussions, and I think we think now that the ECA solution that your devices activate, you've probably got the most comprehensive data and testing in the commercial market. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I mean, I think first of all to address COSH, in terms of safety, of course we have safety data sheets, but we're not required to have COSH because the product is not hazardous. So it makes it very easy to use and for staff to use as well, in that there's no PPE required to use the solutions at the concentrations that the system's generated at. I think that's a great benefit of the solution in terms of its safety aspects and its lack of requirements to have a lot of safety training, because it simply doesn't need it. In terms of certification to EN standards, European standards, then those are required for two reasons. The first reason is to be able to legally place these devices and the solutions that they generate on the market, and to make claims of their effectiveness at killing microorganisms. And the second element is just simple trading standards, that if you are going to make claims, then you need to be able to substantiate those. And we do that through a whole series of tests that are undertaken by independent, accredited, EU accredited laboratories under a whole different range of protocols, which then demonstrates how these solutions perform against different microorganisms, against bacteria, against spores, and particularly at the moment against viruses.
Brilliant. Robin, I really appreciate that. Thank you, guys. I'm just looking at my watch there. We've got 15 minutes and we'd like to go over to a question and answer session. Had lots of questions coming in and also some that we had before. So all ears, and we'll get on some Q&As. Is that okay with you two guys?
Yeah, please do.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we did have some questions submitted before the session started. So if we can start with those, and then we'll move on to some of the questions that have been submitted during the session. The first one is, has it been tested to kill the coronavirus? And I know Robin's just touched on some of that, but if we can possibly just answer that question directly.
Could you help us with that one, Robin?
Yes, for sure. I mean, I think the first thing to say is that there are virtually no commercial biocides that have been tested against COVID-19. And the reason for that is that, no commercial laboratory wants the responsibility of actually having COVID-19 there in the lab. So they're tested against surrogates. And Darren knows far more about this than I do, but the testing is done using viruses that represent similar structures to coronaviruses and to COVID-19. So we've undertaken laboratory tests to European protocol standards to demonstrate that at different concentrations and at different contact times, the solutions will perform against viruses in a set way. So what the test results evidence is that, first of all, you don't require high concentrations. The solutions will work at low concentrations. The second thing is that the efficacy is high, and the benchmark is usually log 4 reduction, which is 99.99% reduction in the viable population of viruses. And the third thing is that the contact times required to achieve that level of kill are very short. And maybe, Darren, you could just expand on that a little bit, particularly with the contact time.
Yeah, I mean, I think all good and reputable suppliers of any technology or any biocide actually should be open to sharing their EN testing results. And it's really, really important that people understand this. There are, in my experience, There are people that are very diligent in terms of presenting their products, and there are some people I've come across who are not. And certainly the good suppliers, and I've known Robin and indeed done some work with Robin and his solutions, they will have that those testing done, and it is a requirement at a European level to have those testing in place, that testing in place, to satisfy the biocidal product register, but also to confirm that the product is effective against bacteria and effective against viruses. Actually, most viruses are actually not difficult to inactivate. So you can't kill a virus. It's a very technical thing, but viruses aren't actually technically alive, but they are capable of replicating. And their structures are very different to bacteria. And you more or less get two types in terms of structures of viruses. You get enveloped viruses and non-enveloped viruses. And what we know about SARS-CoV-2, which causes the disease COVID-19, is that it's a coronavirus, and it's an enveloped coronavirus, and it sort of literally looks like a sun, you know, the corona of a sun. And most biocides are not challenged. Reputable biocides, they're not challenged by the actual coronavirus. Because we know from a scientific perspective that all the usual things that we use, like alcohol, and most of you will be using alcohol on your hands, or chlorine-based products, are pretty effective against the virus. And that's been pretty strong through the messaging. What I think is also important to understand is the speed at which some of these biocides kill. And certainly with the work we've done using electrochemically activated solutions, the fact that you're putting through a lot of electricity adds an extra special electrical quality to the substance. And that helps actually in providing very rapid kill times. So in some of the stuff we've done, we've been able to show that you can inactivate bacteria in under 2 seconds, actually. In a very controlled way. So we know that the mode of action and the speed of kill in relation to those solutions, providing they are prepared correctly and in technology that's been approved, the speed of kill can be really, really quick. I think the key thing is to engage with the manufacturers and understand best how to apply that, you know, in a particular cleaning circumstance. That's often, you know, we have all this theoretical science, which is wonderful, but actually the manufacturers who have all the experience in applying that in a practical way, the knowledge they hold is really critical to ensure that you're effectively combating, contamination from the virus.
Can I just cut across you just on a quick question that's just come up in front of me? I think we discussed this the other day. The question is, the good guidelines advise 1,000 parts per million for disinfection against coronavirus. And I see that the Toucan is 80, this is 100 parts per million, but obviously we can get that to 200 or 300 parts per million. What is this 1,000 parts per million for disinfection? And I hear that all the time when I'm out about the devices.
Well, I'm not sure where that comes from. It kind of seems like a quite arbitrary figure. I mean, I think it really comes down to what you're talking about. There are different types of chlorine. I know that sounds a bit bizarre, but we're talking about two different types of chlorine now. We're talking about hypochlorite and we're talking about hypochlorous. Now, if you were to take those two apart and just say, let's compare hypochlorite with hypochlorous, their mode of action, their efficacy would be very, very different. So what does that mean? Well, that means that on one hand, if I'm using hypochlorite, I may need 300 parts per million of chlorine equivalent, okay? But for hypochlorous, it may mean that I only need 50. So to sort of treat everything with this sort of same, tar everything with the same brush, and to have this homogenized view about biocides and disinfectants is probably a little bit, it's too blunt, really, and it's not subtle enough. What you're really interested in is having biocides that have proven efficacy under those set conditions that Robin described earlier. And the European Union and indeed the UK provide that framework under those EN testing regimes. So that's really where you need that's really where the real value or the real information and knowledge hides. I think these arbitrary figures are probably just there to be very blunt, to be very simple, so that people know. 1,000 ppm is actually quite high. Bleach. I mean, you all know how bleach comes. It comes in a really big, thick container, very difficult to open, and we all keep it tucked away under the sink, out of the way of all the kids. And there's a good reason for that, is because actually bleach is actually quite toxic, and arguably under the current regulations wouldn't even be approved as a product, actually. To me, 1,000 ppm is actually quite high. I think there are definitely alternative products out there that could do a very good job without that requirement.
Right, cheers. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. We're starting to get quite a few questions in, and we've only got less than 10 minutes left before the end of the session. So what I think we'll try and do now is just go through as many questions as quickly as possibly can do, and anything we've missed off, we'll send to all of the audience after the session's finished. Well, we've been asked the same question by two people, by Richard and Charlotte, and it's basically, how do you prove the solution is activated?
Okay, you can buy little chlorine strips. They're very cheap, they're very effective. You can put them, Steve's got one there, you can put them in the solution after activation. The color on the strip changes, and you can then read off the color chart on the tube, and you can assess what the concentration of that solution is. So it's very easy to do, and it's a very good indicator.
I'll just do that actually. Was it Charlotte? I think it was who asked. That's some drinking water, Charlotte, which I've been drinking here. I'm going to put the strip in. I don't know if you can see that. There'll be no change in the colour. It's the same water that we put into the jug, and we added the salt, and we activated it. I'll just pop that in there, and hopefully you can see that the strip has changed colour. And on the strips there's a little gauge on the side there. Again, I know it's very hard to do this, but that's showing me there that that's just below 100 parts per million. So that's to show that beforehand, nothing's happened. Afterwards, the activation has taken place. And that's actually really, I think Robin will agree with me, it's a real simple method to
Can I also just interject there, Steve? I mean, is there a smell? Can you smell any? Does it smell visibly different? So, you can trust your senses. I mean, we prepare dilutions of bleach all the time. We use products out of cans, out of all sorts of things, where we are actually given no visual check or sort of proof that they're actually active or that they're actually working at all. So I think once you use this a few times, you get to the, you get the sense that it's ready, and that it's not unusual, and that it's actually working. We've been working with this type of solutions for well over 20 years, so you can learn a lot if you use it often.
I mean, that leads nicely on to the next question, and the next question is, how long does a product stay active for in the bottle?
Yeah, I mean, the shelf life depends on a number of things. It depends on the exposure to air. So with Steve's jug there, he's taken the lid off. If you were to leave that for 4 or 5 days, then the chlorine in the active substances will dissipate, and the strength of the solution will go down. If you keep them in the spray bottle that Steve's got there, which are sealed and relatively full, then the solution that Steve's generated will maintain its efficacy for 7 or 8 days. I think the thing about these systems are that it shouldn't really be a concern. If anybody's worried about how old this solution is, either throw it away because it's cost you virtually nothing to produce, or just reactivate it again. And if it's only a couple of days old, you'll just have a slightly stronger solution at the end of it. So you shouldn't really be having solution lying around that's more than a few days old, because there's no need for that.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Robin. We've had 2 questions in, which is largely the similar sort of question. And can you use the solution to fog and mist larger areas?
Yes, it is a liquid. So you can either use it as a liquid, you can use it in an atomized form as a spray or a mist. You can freeze it and make it into ice and still maintain its efficacy. So I know that Darren and his team at the University of West of England did some research on the efficacy when it's in a misted form. Darren, you'll correct me, but I think that there was very little loss of efficacy when it was misted, which means that you can apply it as a mist. And of course, that then allows you to disinfect wherever that mist comes into contact with. And quite a few of my discussions recently have been about the importance of contact between the solution and the surface that you're looking to disinfect. It's not about volume, it's about contact. So the finer your spray, whether it's in Steve's spray bottle or in a misting device, the better the contact is and the less volume of solution that you use. You will still do the same job, you will still use the microorganisms because you're making contact between the solution and the surface and the microorganism. If there's no contact, you're not going to disinfect.
And I think as well, that's just a slight word of caution, and this is nobody's fault, but the science around aerosolization of antimicrobials and, you know, if you like, a very well-developed rubric for its application is just not that well developed. I mean, that's just a hole in the whole landscape in this area. It's not because nobody's been bothered to do it. It's because it's actually quite difficult science. You do lose some efficacy when you aerosolize this solution. You lose efficacy in all biocides when they're aerosolized. So I think it's about really understanding what it is you're trying to achieve when you're aerosolizing an antimicrobial. Will you exert an antimicrobial effect on a surface? Yes, you will. But there are issues around how long that needs to happen for, what biological challenge you're trying to address, whether there's human beings involved or not. So, you know, it's a really difficult space. We're trying our best to try and push that science out there to help manufacturers and to help people that may want to use this. But it's a lot less well developed, that area of science, than its use as a liquid disinfectant.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Darren. Now, there's still lots of questions being asked, but we're coming to the end of the session now. We will send an email to all the delegates with some of the answers, and by all means visit the Toucan Eco website at www.toucaneco.co.uk, and there's a really nice FAQ section there. But just before we finish, there's one more thing we'd like to ask of you, and that's to take part in a very quick poll. It's a really simple question, and from what you've heard this afternoon, would you be happy to make the switch to chemical-free cleaning with Toucan Eco? Would you prefer to stick to using your current cleaning chemicals, or even after what you've heard this afternoon, are you not sure? It's just interesting to find your views on this. Okay, well, while hopefully you're answering that quick poll, as I said before, we'll share a recording of the session on an email, along with a real simple guide to cleaning with Toucan Eco. And then finally, the next webinar, which is COVID-19 cleaning training for workplaces, which will be hosted by Robert Scott, Kelly Briley, and Tom Capper. And this talks about cleaning tips for high touch points and unseen places where germs hide. And it's kind of more appropriate for staff and professionals who've suddenly been asked to clean as part of their day-to-day job during the pandemic when they might not have otherwise done so. That's taking place on Thursday, the 29th of October, so in 4 weeks' time, and it's exactly the same time, 12:15 till 1. So if that's of interest to anybody, it'd be great if you could join us, and we'll share the Eventbrite page shortly. So that's it. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And have a great rest of your day.